Shoes. Recorded live.
This call is in the public domain. I'm here interviewing a guy named, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us about yourself.
H. Michael Sweeney, sometimes called the professional paranoid.
Yes, I saw that book on Amazon when I looked up your name. And this is a call about electronic harassment and organized stalking. And what do you think are the most for new targets, people who are just finding out their targets? What do you think is some? If you met somebody and they said, "Yeah, I think I'm being targeted in this way. What should I know?" What would be a basic rundown of what they should know when you first find out you're a TI?
Well, the first thing really is educate yourself. And you can do that a number of ways. If you were contacting me, understand that I have a very organized, methodical routine that I go through with new contacts that's designed to speed things up and make things as easy and understandable as possible. But on the assumption that you're just, the way you stated the question, that the person just starts to think that, hey, maybe I'm being targeted, or, somebody's doing something to me, maybe I don't know what it is, the first step would be to educate yourself. And the general ways that you can do that would be obviously, typing in keywords into search engines, and you'd find out that there are various collective groups of targeted individuals that talk endlessly about the issue. On Facebook, for example, there are many what they call groups that you can get into, which are very loosely organized. Anybody can join. And then there are other kinds of groups like Freedom from Covert Harassment and Surveillance, and they're actual membership kind of organization, and they do some good things. The other option, of course, would be the library. And you'll find books like my own. I have 7 books on political control technology and abuse of power issues, which are all kind of interrelated. Because ultimately, as it boils down to the bottom line fact, political control technology is about abuse of power. And it has a goal that is politically motivated.
Okay. And why do you think that there is, that they meant for the whole, you remember Miriam Carey, the woman getting shot next to her child at the White House, saying that their house was being electronically monitored so soon after the Aaron Alexa thing. Do you think that was just a coincidence, that it just had to bubble over eventually, or that they wanted to bring these issues out in the mainstream and to gauge the public reaction, or what do you think is going on there?
Well, we don't have enough information to know anything concretely. There are a couple of suspicions. We'll call them conspiracy theories for the time being. But one possibility is that this was just a random thing that turned out badly. But I don't think so. And the reason why is because within minutes of the time that she was shot, they were announcing to the world through a spokesperson for the D.C. Metro Police Department there, and standing behind him was a member of the police department that I've already identified as having an intelligence community background, and the chief of that department also has a military intelligence background. So within minutes, they're making an announcement that they know she's got these mental problems. I'd like to know how the Department of Homeland Security, and they referenced Homeland Security in the dialogue, how they knew within minutes of the shooting what her mental state was. They would barely have had time to ascertain her identity, much less her mental state and medical history. Now, at the best, they might have found a prescription bottle in her car. And let's say, for example, it said Prozac. Well, that might imply she has a mental issue, but it wouldn't necessarily give them a clear understanding of what that mental issue was. So I don't buy that real quick response as being indicative of no conspiracy. It implies to me that somebody knew that she was going to be doing this and that it was, in essence, a staged event. So you have somebody who's a targeted individual, moreover, perhaps what I call a programmable individual, somebody who is like a patsy. They're told
somebody
to
who's
do
been
something.
broken down enough that a few little influences might drive them over the edge to do some desired effect.
I'm sorry, say again.
Somebody who's been broken down with the disorienting effect of the targeting, so that they, at a moment's notice, they can pick one that's, you know, a prime candidate for some sort of public, you know, shooting or some news story that benefits them. Or what do you think they're programming them for? Different.
Well, the whole idea of late, of the last almost decade now, by every administration has been to try to create enough fear in everybody's mind that we will allow them to invade our privacy in this way and that way, to accept the TSA, to accept the NSA, to accept militarization of police and so forth. So part of the program that they've been running on us in media coverage of mass shootings is a part of that, but also pointing to mental health issues. The more that they can make us worry about crazy people, the easier it'll be for them to silence anybody by simply saying they're crazy. And they've already attempted that on a scale. So, for example, as early as, I believe it was about 2006, there were various interviews conducted with various officials here and in the UK where they literally said things like conspiracy theorists, just as an example, were mentally ill. In other words, you can't challenge government unless you're mentally ill. And so once you label somebody mentally ill, and under Obamacare and especially the executive order that he wrote today, or announced today, and I think he wrote it earlier, the idea is that once somebody in the officialdom decides that you're mentally ill, that information becomes public information within law enforcement, and can be used to restrict your access to weapons, and at some point it can be used perhaps to institutionalize you. So if you get out of hand and out of control with your activism, suddenly you're mentally ill. This is the same technique that the Soviet Union used at the height of its oppression and silenced critics of Soviet policy, especially in the satellite countries. And kind of lost track of your question, but I think that would kind of addresses it.
Yes, definitely. And I just want to throw out there that because of this format where anybody can call in, if somebody calls in to troll and try and distract, I'll mute them as quick as possible, but they might shout a few things at us. That tends to happen on this website, unfortunately. But
and I apologize because I'm having to use a cell phone that is not my own. It has a poor quality, so I will have
fine.
a
It sounds
difficulty
great.
hearing anyway.
It's better than average, and way better. And I want to get into some of the stuff that's been bothering me lately. Is how are they, if you know, how are they able to make you perceive things that are physically impossible? Like for a lot of us TIs, it'll start off with seeming like you're having a supernatural experience. Like you might, like one thing we were talking about in the chat room for this show earlier was how me and another guy were talking about how they make it seem like people are able to, like you'll look at somebody and it looks like they transform into another person. Like how are they able? The gullibility, it's like a gullibility weapon on one level. Like what's going on there? Is it all is it projected through the mind, or do you know about how that works?
Actually, that's a little bit of a broad question, and I think I'm going to choose to answer it as though it were a little bit narrower, and then we can talk about diversions from that. But may I ask for about 10 seconds of time first?
Sure.
Sure, thanks. You can vamp.
And anybody in the chat room can suggest questions if you have any crucial questions to ask the expert in this subject. And you can find his book on Amazon, Professional Paranoid, I think it's called. The Professional Paranoid by Michael Sweeney. Adding it to my wish list.
Okay, I apologize for that. I was just posting on Facebook. I've got about 3,000 people there that might hopefully pump up your audience level here. Okay, so the question is, how are they able to achieve some of the more dramatic effects that just don't make sense to the victim?
Right.
Would that be a simple summary?
Yeah.
The first thing that I usually say to people that I'm talking with, or one of the first things, is one aspect of targeting that is usually not considered is that at least often, not necessarily all the time, but often there is a deliberate effort to make the victim believe that the methods of targeting are different than they really are. So, for example, excuse me, a person might believe that they're using a satellite, and or a person might believe that they're able to see through their own eyes, see what they see. There are ways to simulate and or convince the victim that that is taking place when more conventional, easier to accomplish, less expensive type methods are available and do the same job. One example that comes to mind may not be the best, but one client told me once that she was doing the math on her notebook for balancing her checkbook. And she figured out how much money she wanted to deposit, and she went ahead and wrote it into her checkbook. Then she went to the bank with that money to make the deposit. And the perps came in behind her and started talking loudly between themselves in a routine manner that she was kind of used to, and immediately put her on edge. And they started talking clearly about her and talking about filling out the checkbook and writing down the deposit before she ever even went to the bank and citing the exact dollar amount. So her conclusion is they were seeing what she saw through her eyes, when in truth they simply had good surveillance in an overhead camera in her bedroom. So there are ways to make a victim think that the problem is other than it really is, and that has a significant advantage, and that is they will fight the wrong problem and never be able to resolve the real problem because they're not applying the right methods. Secondly, it frustrates them and takes them closer to that desired step of giving up. I mean, the real purpose of targeting is to reduce a person to a psychological, what I call a social economic zero, a political zero, where nobody will listen to them, nobody will bother to help them because they think they're crazy. Now, there's different reasons that a person might be targeted. There are basically three kinds of